This is Schomburg, the man who built a library, part 3. So some of the last things that we read, we discussed revolutionaries. We talked about revolutionaries like Toussaint Louverture. We talked about, who were some other people? We also talked about Nat Turner. We talked about, David Walker. We read a little bit about his 3 wives, Arturo Schomburg's 3 wives, and what happened with them as well as his children. We talked about whitewashing and how that happened with John James Audubon as well as Alexander Dumas. And then it continues into different people like Alexander Pushkin, and even, which honestly, this is something that I learned, Ludwig van Beethoven also has African roots. And then we go into seafaring, which was, I think that's a great title for this section, discussing Paul Koufi, and then leading into Marcus Garvey, who Arturo Schomburg actually knew, which is really cool. And then we talk about some other folks that Arturo Schomburg worked with, involved in the Harlem Renaissance, like Alain Locke, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and just a few other folks like Jesse Redmond Fawcett, and who else are we talking about? Arna Bontemps, Georgia Douglas Johnson, Aaron Douglas, and I think even Claude McKay. Yep, Claude McKay was discussed. So if these are names that you don't know, please take the time to look them up, because you'll understand how pivotal and how influential these folks all were. And the fact that Arturo Schomburg rubbed shoulders with them was phenomenal. So where we left off, we're just gonna dive right back in. So, writer and researcher. Arturo Schomburg aimed to prove Africans' place in world history. In Harlem, he joined the Men's Sunday Club, which grew into the Negro Society for Historical Research. The society sponsored lectures and galas, and in his first year, amassed more than 300 books and manuscripts. Arturo stored that collection at his home, alongside his own. He was also president of the American Negro Academy and Grand Secretary of the all-black Prince Hall Grand Masonic Lodge. And he served on the committee to start a Negro division at the Harlem branch of the New York Public Library. Civic-minded but no social climber, he skipped the famed parties of the Roaring '20s jazz age. Arturo preferred leafing through history to dancing the Lindy Hop. With a busy schedule of lectures and meetings, it's a wonder he had time for research and writing. Arturo's articles, essays, and letters to the editor shared what he had learned, facts kept in darkness for too long. He profiled 18th century composer Chevalier de Saint-Georges, a French knight known as the Black Mozart. Saint-Georges was a song into Arturo's heart. He also wrote of gladiators, military leaders, and majesty. One article tells of a huge pearl found by an African slave on an island in the Gulf of Panama. The jewel adorned Spanish queens until Napoleon's brother took it to France. Sold to a British duke, the pearl was lost in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, but was recovered each time. The gem's fabled past earned the name La Peregrina, the Wanderer. Arturo's research pulled him along the triangular trade route, just as surely as wind, currents, and greed carried supplies from Europe to Africa to barter for slaves, and took captive Africans to American colonies to grow sugarcane that would be distilled into rum to be sold in Europe. Through the pages of history, Arturo toured a diaspora. His sense of Africana transcended national boundaries. Heritage for him was braided from many threads. Arturo's most important article was the survey graphic. The Negro Digs Up His Past ran in a special issue, Harlem, Mecca of the New Negro. On the contents page, Arturo is listed among the other contributors, scholars, and creative geniuses. Schomburg's words give voice to the ancestors. Their pigment flowed through his pen. Sold. Rumor has it that Schomburg's wife put her foot down. Either his books or his family must go. Only a threat like that could make him part with his prizes. There were bookshelves filled with books all over the house. A family member said, even in the bathroom. The books were carefully cataloged, inventoried in Arturo's head, and arranged by size and color of binding. But Arturo's library had outgrown private hands. He had turned down a very handsome offer because the collection deserved a wider audience. Arturo had already lent items to libraries and staged exhibitions for schools and community groups. He approached the New York Public Library, but it lacked funds to purchase his vast holdings. So the Carnegie Corporation bought the entire lot for $10,000, and in 1926 donated it to the library. If Harlem was the heart of African American culture, the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library was the mind. If the library were a university, its alumni would include the Harlem Renaissance figures who lost themselves amid its stacks and wrote in a quiet room downstairs. Schomburg's collection, which one newspaper called Matchless, was housed in the third floor and would become the cornerstone of the division of Negro history, literature, and prints. It included more than 5,000 books, several thousand pamphlets, plus priceless prints and papers. Among them, an autographed first edition of poems by Phyllis Wheatley, a brilliant slave girl. There were handwritten poems by Paul Laurence Dunbar, letters of heroic General Toussaint Louverture, speeches of slave-turned-statesman Frederick Douglass, Benjamin Banneker's early American Almanac, and a 1573 book of poems by Spaniard Juan Latino, perhaps the first printed book by a Black person. Fisk University. Arturo Schomburg studied the past, but he did not dwell in it. Quite the opposite. His mission looked to the future. I am proud, said Schomburg, to be able to do something that may mean inspiration for the youth of my race. After a decade of headaches and nosebleeds, Arturo retired in 1929 from his job at Bankers Trust, but he did not rest. He spent more time writing and researching and tending the book collection at the 135th Street Library. On the strength of his reputation as a bibliophile, Arturo was invited to Nashville in 1931 to found Fisk University Library's Negro Collection. By 1932, he had added 4,000 volumes to the library's holdings. Lincoln's Bible was a centerpiece. When Arturo first held it, he thought of the free blacks from Baltimore who had presented the hefty book to the president during the Civil War. That Bible was a priceless treasure. But Arturo did not want Black heritage behind glass. He wanted his research to reach students, so he told professors what to teach. Include the practical history of the Negro race from the dawn of civilization to the present time. Then young Blacks would hold their heads high and view themselves as anyone's equal. Doctor. After a year at Fisk University in Tennessee, Arturo Schomburg returned to New York. At the public library's 135th Street branch, his treasures were now the core of the division of Negro history, literature, and prints. Arturo became the guardian of his collection. His peculiar method of shelving books arranged them by size and color like a bouquet. In fact, he fired a new librarian for using the standard Dewey Decimal System. The historical figures he unearthed still spoke to him. Tell our stories, proclaim our glories. From his perch on the library's third floor, Arturo guided researchers, spoke at afternoon teas, and used his own funds to enlarge the collection. Among his gifts, African Venus and Said Abdullah, classic bronzes by French sculptor Charles-Henri Joseph Cordier, bought in Paris. Both pieces had shown in the Louvre in the 1860s. At $50, the stunning pair were a steal. Arturo was not wealthy, but he used the money from the sale of his collection to build on it. When an item was over his budget, he was not ashamed to appeal to his friends for funds. He asked a fellow book collector to donate a bronze and marble bust of Shakespearean character Othello, a Moorish general, to put on display. Arturo organized exhibitions about Russian literary giant Alexander Pushkin and Black Shakespearean actor Ira Aldrich, our pioneers. Arturo's weekly column for the Amsterdam News was read all over Harlem. The library staff called Arturo Dr. Schomburg. The homegrown historian had earned that honor. Art. In etchings, prints, paintings, and sculpture, Arturo saw not just art, but also an opportunity to offer visible proof of the talent and accomplishments of African descendants. The eye, he supposed, would refute the lie. Arturo was drawn to works showing Black subjects regardless of the artist's skin color, and to works created by Black artists regardless of subject matter. Whether he was collecting the work of Harlem Renaissance painters such as Aaron Douglas and Louis Mailloux Jones, sculptors like Charles-Henri Joseph Cordier, or Spanish Baroque artists like Sebastián Gómez and Juan de Paris, Arturo embraced and pursued with the same passion and persistence that he did book buying. Art, he thought, might reach those who would never read a rare book. Spain. Arturo Schomburg had gained respect from Harlem intellects, but he had yet to trace his own roots. African, Spanish, and Taino Indian, from the Caribbean to Europe and Africa, so he voyaged across the Atlantic, not to collect, but to connect the dots. I depart now, he said, on a mission of love to recapture my lost heritage. He mined libraries, museums, and rare bookstores for Spain's link to the chain of slavery. He beheld masterworks painted by African hands and marveled at palaces and mosques built by the Arab and African Muslims who ruled Spain for 800 years. These scenes and canvases Arturo filed in his mind's eye. Touring Spain, France, Germany, and England did not produce answers to all of his questions. But Arturo had more than enough facts to take home. This was Schomburg's only trip to Europe and the furthest he would ever travel. No distance was too great to set history straight. The islands. Arturo Alfonso Schomburg may have felt kinship with African Americans and their cause of equality, and he even worked to build pride among them. He may have adopted the angelicized version of his name, Arthur, and insisted that his children speak only English and not Spanish, his mother tongue. But he never lost his love for the Caribbean or his longing for Puerto Rico, the island of his birth. His research took him back to the Caribbean and to Latin America, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Cuba. Arturo was a bridge between great minds in Havana and Harlem. In 1932, he met Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen and with Club Antenas, a group of writers, artists, and scholars who celebrated Cuba's rich and colorful cultural heritage. Most of Arturo's publications focused on the Caribbean and Spain. His first, an article on the Haitian Revolution and Independence. At the 135th Street Library in Harlem, Arturo organized exhibitions of Cuban folklore and literature. But despite his yearnings, he never visited Puerto Rico after 1909. Epitaph, 1938. If this proverb, a book is like a garden carried in a pocket, is true, then Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, the historian and book collector, had a green thumb and a harvest of pride. There was no field of human endeavor that he did not till with his determined hand, that he did not sow with seeds of curiosity, where he did not weed out lies and half-truths, or that he did not water with a growing sense of African awareness and heritage. If a book is a garden carried in a pocket, then Schomburg yielded a bumper crop, blanketed Mount Kilimanjaro with African violence. And that ends this book. Now there are a lot of different, there's a large timeline in the back of this book, which I think is phenomenal. And there's also a bibliography which gives credit to all the individuals in this book. But I think that this is such a phenomenal book, and that it's something that's necessary to be written about a man that a lot of people don't know existed, and more importantly, his contribution to America, to the world, because it gives credit to those people who did phenomenal, wonderful things. And he himself did phenomenal, wonderful things. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Like, share, get this book out there. It's phenomenal.